Welcome to Dyson Sphere Program. My name is Nilaus. This is a new tutorial. This time we're going to look at the beautiful Dyson Sphere Program. The actual name of the game, the Dyson Sphere. Actually, we are not, because as I was doing the scripting, I realized that there's just so much good information. So I'm going to split it into two. One where this one where we're going to be talking about the Dyson Swarm, the ray guns, and the ray receivers, and then another one where we talk about rockets, the Dyson Sphere design, and sort of the end game setups with more graviton lenses and critical photon generation. So we leave that for a second one because there's enough to cover. It's for several videos, and I don't want to just cram it too fast because there's a lot of things. So you can maybe say that isn't it a bit late in the cycle of this game to come up with a tutorial on the Dyson Sphere? Well, maybe, but some of the tutorials are already out there are more of the kind like you do this and then this happens. But I want to add a few more detail and some of the experience that I've gotten through my nearly 300 hours of playthrough and just some of the things that are not super obvious actually. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna cover the EM rail ejector. We are going to cover the Dyson Swarm design. We're going to cover the ray receivers. So where do we start? Let's start with the purpose. The purpose of building a Dyson Swarm in the beginning. First of all, let's look at the tech. The purpose is that you can generate a ton of power. But the other and maybe even more relevant one is the fact that you can actually it looks super awesome and it feels so good to build the first Dyson Swarm. So here we have it's only blue and red signs, so you can get it incredibly quick. There are a few things here that particularly the super magnetic rings are a bit annoying, but these things you should be able to get this and then just start by making, I don't know, a couple per second. It's gonna be fine. So the purpose is that you will start shooting solar sails with these rail ejectors around the sun, your local sun, and that will generate a lot of solar sails that will circulate the sun. They are expiring, so they will last for half an hour plus more for research. They will fire every 3 seconds. 20 per minute is a bit one every 3 seconds, and there are a lot of quirks to how these work. You can see all of this weird thing here. This is, you can set it up to different orbits. We're going to go into that overlay here. You can see that if you ignore this, well, don't quite ignore it. Just take this very subliminal, superliminal messaging. If we look at, I'll disable the Dyson Sphere because that's not what we're going to look at. We are going to look at these orbits, the orbit 1 and orbit 2. You can't even see which one. Oh, there you go. Orbit 1 and orbit 2. So you can define new orbits here, and you can define how big they should be. There are some things you can't because there's a planet in the way, so you can actually have it outside of the planet. That's nice. It's not necessarily a good idea though. The inclination, so you can make like weird shapes, and I encourage you to test it. There is no meaningful discrepancy between them, and the thing is, you have to set each one which of the orbits you're going to shoot at. So I would say it's mainly aesthetic. The reason why I feel that it's mainly aesthetic is because it will not shoot at the location that is most relevant. It'll shoot at the location that it's set to. What this means is that no matter how many different orbits you have, you will have basically a 50% uptime because each of these needs to have line of sight to the orbit they're set to. I've set all of these up to, I think they're all set up to number 2. I am going to set it up here. I'm going to just, here I have requested a lot of solar. And I don't know why I would want to do that. I've requested a lot of solar, so all I need to do is just set it out here. I'm not going to go so much into the actual designs of how to do it, but more of this general placement because we'll have to, figure out how it works in your setup. And this is more about how they work. So what happens now is they go all the way in here and they just start filing in to this pretty big setup of ray guns. You're not going to have this in the early game, but this is but what happens? Nothing happens. Nothing happens. And this is where shows exactly the problem that most people will realize. So these are yellow because they have the solar cells, but you just can't do it. And this is because the target status is it's on a pitch limit. It is trying to aim for something that is below the horizon. But if we look at here, unfortunately at the, actually like this, can I do this? If we try to sort of figure out, this is how it looks in the overlay like that. It is trying to shoot at orbit number 2, this one. It's trying to shoot at something that is, this point here is rotating all the way around. So it's going to be a point on this, rotating around the sun, that it's trying to aim at. And that means in this case, it is trying to shoot at a point, and we can't see that point because it's obviously not being shot at. But since that is basically a rotating sphere around here, then we're trying to shoot at a location that's probably down here. So we have to wait until this orbit rotates around the sun, because it does, and then only then will they start working. And that makes it super annoying. And this is why, this is also why I chose this one in particular, because it goes sort of orthogonal to what we would. So if I have my planet orbiting around here, then I thought, hey, if I just do it orthogonal, it'll always be able to see the high point or the low point. So it should always be shooting. That's not how it works. It doesn't shoot to any point. It shoots to a specific point. And that specific point is rotating around. So it'll be idle for a long time. And then it'll suddenly start shooting. And then it'll be shooting like crazy, because it's shooting at a point that is now above. If we look at this pitch and yaw here, not yaw, but just the pitch angle, it's minus 27. And you can see it's slightly going down because this axis is getting closer. If we start changing these to, for example, number 1, you would see that it'll try to shoot at another location. And then I could this is one of the issues, I could then change all of these, or I could just allow it to wait. I really wish there was a sound, but if there was a sound, I probably wish there wasn't a sound, because that would probably be... There we go. Now you have the sound files to input. If we look at our fledgling Dyson Sphere, I have 2 solar sails, 3 solar sails in orbit. I can't even see it, obviously. But what I want to do is, you can see here, this one, it will only shoot when the pitch angle is 5% or more. So as this one decreases, it'll go, these will trace. They'll try to trace where it's going at, and you can see it's shooting here. But all the other ones, they're still at a negative angle, so nothing happens. I am going to copy, paste, and get that back. And let's wait until we get to a point where all of these will start shooting, because then you'll get to see how it works. But I wanted to make this example so I could highlight how important it is that how important it is where you place it, but also you cannot place it in any way that it's always active. You can place it definitely better than what I have here, and that's something we are coming back to. And now suddenly we see the action. It went incredibly quick. And what happened, it was just below the surface, and now they are all just pointing upwards, and they are shooting absolutely crazy. So this is exactly what happened, because the point, now we can look at it from here. The point here is that they are now shooting they're shooting here, and they're going into this orbit. Let's see it. So they're trying to shoot at this point. And this point, you can see here, it gradually moves. And since my planet is here and it's shooting downwards, that means as long as it's from basically here, I guess, then it'll start shooting like crazy. But then it'll stop here, because it's like 5%. Let's just sort of, for the sake of argument, it might be slightly off because of the actual rotation of the planet. But generally speaking, what we're seeing here is that it's basically going to shoot half the time. If I do a Dyson swarm that is orthogonal, then to my rotational axis, or my rotational plane around the sun, then I will be having, let's say it's 30 minutes, then I'll have 50 minutes of nothing, 50 minutes of barrage, and that's really not very practical. It's not a very good way of doing it. It looks brilliant when all of it is shooting, but the problem is it's going to be putting a lot of solar cells into orbit that will then expire. And then it's going to be idle for a long time. And it's not very good. So definitely my recommendation is two things. If you want to optimize it, you want to do two things. You want to build further away from the sun. Why is that? Well, because then you are less affected by the angle. The angle will be smaller. I'm going to go here. If you, for example, shoot from out, well, further out, like Anchor 3, for example, which I also have orbits at. This one can actually be shooting both from the north and the south at the same time, while this one will be having short bursts where it's extremely active and then long, well, there's a period where it's super active and then a period where it's not doing anything at all. And you can see how much we're putting in here. This point is... It's just keep shooting at this point, but this point is actually also going to rotate. So we're going to get, yeah, it's going to stop working soon. And so I would recommend building it further away. The logical thing here was you're going to make it, make it close. And the other one is make a Dyson swarm that is parallel to your rotational plane. So like this, you basically find out where you're shooting from. So let's say from Anchor 3, and then that one here, and then you set up a Dyson swarm that is a parallel to it. It's kind of hard to explain. I think we'll have a look at it just so I can show it to you. So here we are on another planet. This is Anchor 3, so it's further away from the sun, and I am going to let my solar cells go out, and I'm also going to let them go out on the other side. There, we're not going to look at designs. There are some good things and some bad things about it, but what we're seeing here is here. These ones, they are at a minus, because they're slightly below. These are all shooting at, they're shooting at, okay, so this is actually interesting. I think I've set the inner one to shoot at circle number 1 and the outer one to shoot at cycle number 2. Cycle number 2 is the one that is going orthogonal. Let's look at it from here. And do we not see... We don't see the one that we are shooting at yet. Oh, there. There. Very, very small amounts coming in here. There. But it still is very, very visible. What you can see here is the more dense line. It's of course not as dense as this one. Is going into here. While that one up here is shooting towards some point up here. I don't know why they decide these points, but they do. And did the game crash? Oh, autosave. Haha. Okay. So basically what you can see is that these ones are going to be much more active. If we look at it here, there will be half of them active, half of them will be covered because they're on the, well, night side, but about half of them will be shooting at any given time, and that's going to be pretty much irrespective of, because you can see that they're shooting into an orbit that's here. So once the planet rotates, it'll go here. Of course, we are still in the summer zone. In the winter zone, there will be fewer shooting, but there will still be some shooting. And therefore, my recommendation is build it further away from the sun you're shooting at. Build it at the polar regions so that the night-day cycle is shorter. So there's going to be less time when they're not shooting. Build the Dyson swarm if you want to optimize it towards high uptime. Build it parallel to the rotational plane. Let's see, V. The rotational plane here. And of course, one thing, there are two things that I have to mention because otherwise you're going to jam into it. I know there's a mod that can auto-select between Dyson swarms. I don't care about it. We're not talking about modded playthrough. This is vanilla. The second one is there are some very, very few planets, extremely few, that are tidal locked. That means they have the same side facing the sun all the time. I have discovered more than 50 and close to 100 planets and I haven't found a single one. So the argument of just find one of those is invalid. You are probably not going to do that. So now we have we start putting some power into the Dyson swarm, and you can see it's looking pretty damn nice. The question is then, what are we going to do then? What are we going to do? We are now going to, we have a ton of power here. You can see this part is generating 1.63 gigawatts, but at the time, this is a massive amount of power. By the early game, you can start doing this at blue-red science. So this is super nice power that you have available. You just ignore the Dyson cell, that's late game, but the Dyson swarm is generating so much power, and you're just putting solar cells in. My recommendation is treat it as a continuous, treat it like you would treat it making fuel rods. You have to keep producing power. This is the same. You have to keep producing solar cells because they're going to expire after half an hour plus a bit more for research. The next thing about this is, well, you can see this star illumination has 1.622. That means the power generated is multiplied by 1.622. Where does this 1.622 come from? It comes from the star itself. This is a blue star. And if I can click on it, boop, you will see that it has 1.622 in luminosity. So the higher the luminosity of the planet, the star, the better it is. Now, if we go out here and you can sort of like, oh, this is a massive yellow star or red giant. It's actually not generating a lot of light for some reason, but it doesn't. What you really want to look for is the type O star. The type O I have on here. They are the best ones. They go above 2.447. I've seen going up to 2.6. They can probably go more, but this is the best one I have available. So that means whatever you produce around this one will be multiplied by 2.447 in terms of output. So definitely get those. I would also say the blue ones, like the one I have here on my anchor system, this one. And somehow I got this instead of the sun. There. This is 1.66. So generally the B-type stars, they are above 1.5, and the O-type star are above 2. So there are probably a few O-type stars. You can also build it around a black hole or a neutron star if you feel so inclined. But you can see, not surprisingly, a black hole that doesn't have a lot of luminosity. And also, let's see, neutron stars don't have a lot either. Let's just go to some random one and just going out. So I can click the neutron star. Also, not very much. Looks good, but it doesn't have enough. So now we come to the second point: is how are you going to extract all that power out of the swarm? You have the guns; they're set up. You've set it up correctly. You've set up your swarm correctly. You're starting shooting out there. Now what? Now comes the ray receivers, and we're going to jump back to our ray receiver setup on Anchor 1. We're back here on Anchor 1, and they are just absolutely shooting. The interesting thing here is they are actually also pitch limited on the altitude, so they can't go shoot straight up, which is another reason why this is a bad setup. Let's go again on this one. You can see here the angle is simply too sharp for some of them, but it's still been all the way around, and it's just working. But then again, at some point it'll just completely stop working. Here we have the Dyson swarm up there. But let's look at the ray receivers. Ray receivers are the only way you can get the power out of the sun again. So you have to build ray receivers in order to get the power up. So these are the ray receivers, and they have two modes of operation. One is power generation, and the other one is a late game option, photon generation. We are not going to talk about this. This is in my second tutorial about the Dyson Sphere. And the only thing that you see is this is the one that actually uses a lot of power from the sphere. That was 123.25. This one, though, is going to be... can I find one that's better? Here. Okay, so this one is how much is being consumed. What we're looking at this point is, and this is really interesting, I'm going to explain how this works because it's kind of complicated and it takes a bit of getting used to. The maximum output is how much you can output from this into the network. But it will request more from the Dyson Sphere because it has an efficiency rating. This efficiency rating means that it is going to request power, in this case 14.1, and that if it was possible to request 14.1, then it would output into the network 12.5 because of the efficiency rating of 88.35. This is increased by research, and this is also quite into the infinite research, so it's very effective right now. There's another little quirk, is if you are consuming too much power from the network, requesting too much. This is the thing that's also really weird when you look at this and go like, but can I build as many as I want? Well, you can build as many as you want, but you can see how much Dyson Sphere status. You can see that I'm actually, and this is super important, I'm actually requesting more power than I'm actually producing at this location. And this is why you can see this number is slightly lower, and this is slightly lower, because I can't get all of it out. I'm simply trying to draw more power out of my Dyson Sphere than it is possible to generate at this moment. If it keep going, this will actually get up to full, and I can then, all of these will work at 100%. Currently it's not working at 100% because it's actually getting 14.1 out of 14.1, but clearly it's still not 100%. It might be 99% or 98%. You can see like it's 64.5 that I request, but there's only 64.4 available in the total network. So all of these, you add them together, and that will be it. If I want to do something, I could just kill one of these and then I should be fine. There we go. Now you can see that I'm generating exactly 12.5 megawatts of power for each of these. I am reserving 14.1 and the total sphere status here. So now we have all of it. The only thing that isn't explained is the continuous receiving. If I take one of these out and I try to put it in again, here you can see it starts at 5, and then for as long as it keeps being in the sun, then it will slowly increase, and that will increase up to 12.5. So when you stamp it down, it starts at 5 megawatt, which isn't much, but you can get it up to 12.5 if you keep feeding it. Or sorry, if you keep, I'm just gonna build this one there, otherwise I'll go crazy. It doesn't do anything because there's nothing on the belt. So what this means is you want your ray receivers to always be in the sun. Well, they are slightly more forgiving than the ray guns. Ray guns need pretty much a clear line of sight, but these ones, even the part of here that is directed away, will still be working because it still has some kind of line of sight. So, but if I was to place some of these at the dark side of the sun, here, just let's place one here. It's generating just a tiny bit. It can still probably see just a tiny bit of the sphere, but it's not really generating much because the efficiency, you can see the strength of the signal is very low at this point. But as it comes into view, it increases. It is very easy to get the ray receivers to work. So, but you also absolutely want them to keep working, because as soon as they lose line of sight, the continuous receiving starts going down, and as it goes down, you're getting less throughput, and then it has to build back up when it goes back in the sun. So again, my recommendation is build these close to the poles. 2 reasons. It will mean that they are going to be less time unavailable. Actually, they probably will always be receiving there will always be line of sight to some part of the sphere. So, but even if they don't, they will only sort of dip very slowly and then come back up online. Also, the other one is you can't really use this area around the poles for efficient building, so use it for this. There is one there's one additional part about this, how you can actually increase the throughput quite dramatically, and that is through the use of graviton lenses. This is slightly later game, but it's not like so late game that I don't feel that it's worthwhile to do. Graviton lenses can be put out here. Now we know that we've seen that they are generating 12.5, but the graviton lenses will do 2 things. First of all, boom, it'll simply flat out double it at the cost of 1 graviton lens every 4 minutes. So that's not very many graviton lenses. Maybe you end up using 2 per second for this entire setup. that's totally valuable to put it in if you need more power, of course. So right now what we have here is we have just like that, we've doubled the power output. Really nice. Or basically half the number of receivers you need to place to get the same power out. But it gets better than this, because this actually also means that I'm going to take some of these out so I have them. If you have a planet, or how do I explain this? The graviton lenses means that you can also work below the the sun. So this one, it has a very weak signal. If I put here, boom, it gets 100% signal. Because it will work by sort of graviton lenses, it'll work on the reflection of the something in the atmosphere. Atmosphere, you say? How do I know if a planet has an atmosphere? Well, this is really weird. If it has wind energy ratio of anything except 0, it has an atmosphere, and the ray receivers will do this part. Do this part where it increases the strength. If there is 0 wind, you will still get double output from the ray receiver, from having the lens in the ray receiver, but you will not get the benefit of sort of having the strength be increased even though it's below the horizon. So it's super complicated, but it's also makes a lot of sense. It just takes a bit of time to figure it out. So basically, if you have graviton lenses, you will always on any planet double the output. Good, that's worth it. On any planet that has an atmosphere, that means it has a wind energy greater than 0. It will also allow it to work below the horizon. It does not work completely opposite of the sun. So if you make like a band around the equator, it will start dipping when it is at the furthest away from the sun. It will start dipping, but generally speaking, anywhere that's close to the orbit here. And have I lost my sense of north and south? I might have. I completely have lost all sense of direction. There we go, found it. Alright, so now these are set up, and they are, you can see now, because we've upgraded all of these, we are now over-consuming the Dyson Sphere. And I think that's basically what I want to explain. So we've talked about the ray guns, how they work, 1/3 sail per second, how they need line of sight to fire, what is a good orbit and a bad orbit around the star. We talked about the Dyson swarm, where to go, how to get it, what kind of star is the best one, and also we talk about the ray receiver, which is the only way to get the power out of the Dyson swarm or Dyson sphere and back into the network, how it interacts, what's the best locations, how it interacts with the graviton lenses. And now I would say you know everything there is to know about how to build your Dyson swarm. I would highly recommend building it basically as soon as you can get away with it, because one is it's free power, but the other thing, it's such an iconic thing that you can look at. The one thing that I will say as well about this is you should try to go visit it, because it's pretty damn amazing that you can actually go visit this. This is actually not just something that you can see out there. You know, you can actually get inside this and actually see the little swarms out here. So if you are now in the middle of the swarm, you can actually see the individual there. Each and individual little solar sail is actually an object that is tracked and stored and saved. And isn't this just absolutely insanity? And this is the mandatory. I love this game. So if you found this tutorial useful, then be sure to hit the like button. Let me know in the comment section below if there's something I forgot, because then I can always add it to the second one about the Dyson Sphere, which will come shortly. And yeah, if you want to support the channel, I do have a Patreon for that. There's also worth mentioning. And yeah, otherwise, if you haven't subscribed, then consider subscribing. I'll be producing a lot more Dyson Sphere content here on the channel. And also I'm streaming live on Twitch, so you can also come by and check out the stuff I'm doing there. So hope you enjoyed it. I will see you guys in the next episode or in the next tutorial. Thank you for watching. And as always, stay effective.